The wedding in Santorini was supposed to be Destiny's grand triumph. 50 missed calls in a single night. I assumed my parents were calling to brag about her ring. When I finally answered, I found the celebration had self-destructed in ways my logical brain couldn't process. But before the chaos, there was only the steady hum of my refrigerator in Boston. The blue light of my phone screen was the only thing cutting through the darkness of my living room. Just me, the silence, and a digital wall of impending disaster. Welcome to Turning Tables Stories channel. I'm currently enjoying a quiet cup of coffee while watching the view outside, but that stillness stands in stark contrast to the digital chaos Gabrielle was about to face. Before we continue, tell me, where are you listening from, and what's your favorite drink right now? I'd love to hear from you as we head back to that dark living room in Boston. My phone vibrated again against the mahogany surface of my coffee table. The light was an aggressive, clinical blue in the total darkness of my Boston apartment. It was 11:51 p.m. A Venmo request popped up from my mother, Emily, $4,500. The attached note was a masterpiece of desperation and bad acting. Gabby, sweetie, the resort at Oya is being impossible. Their card machine is down and they need the final deposit for the rehearsal dinner now. Please Venmo it, just for an hour. Your father will pay you back as soon as he moves money from his savings. I stared at the screen. As a senior compliance officer, my entire professional life is built on detecting patterns of fraud. This wasn't a family emergency. It was a recurring transaction. The broken card machine excuse was a family classic. It was the same recycled lie they used when my brother Tyler got into legal trouble last year and needed immediate bail money. It was the same script they followed when Destiny decided she couldn't live without a designer handbag that cost more than her rent. I knew the math. I knew my parents had refinanced their home for the second time just to afford the flights to Greece. I knew they were living in a house of cards, and they expected me to be the glue. For years, I had been the invisible benefactor of their lifestyle, funding a luxury I was never invited to share. Every time they fell, I was the net. Every time they overspent, I was the bailout. I had spent my 20s being the reliable daughter, which was really just a polite way of saying I was their interest-free loan provider. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel that heavy, familiar weight of guilt pressing against my ribs. I felt something else. I felt the kind of cold, sharp clarity that usually comes when you realize a business partnership has become a liability. In the world of finance, every account has a hard limit. I realized that my patience for my family was no different. The balance was trickling down to zero with every frantic text. I didn't call to hear my mother's practice sob. I didn't text to ask why a 5-star resort couldn't handle a simple transaction. I didn't need to. I knew their credit was a graveyard of maxed out limits. I typed one single word into the message box. No explanation, no apologies. I hit decline on the Venmo request. Then I swiped into my settings and engaged the do not disturb mode. I plugged my phone into the charger and watched the screen go black. I walked to my window and looked out at the Boston skyline. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a balance sheet. I was done funding the circus. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and went back to my spreadsheets. The numbers in front of me were honest. They were stable. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I sat in the soft glow of my desk lamp, the silence of my Boston apartment, feeling like a hard-earned dividend. For 5 years, I hadn't just been a daughter. I had been the primary underwriter for a failing enterprise known as my parents' ego. I closed my eyes and could almost see the paper trail of my own exploitation. I remembered the frantic call from my father, Bradley, 3 years ago. He needed $6,000 for an emergency surgery he hadn't planned for, because he had spent his actual emergency fund on a new truck he couldn't afford. Then there was my mother, Emily, and the $12,000 in credit card debt I wiped clean after she went on a shopping spree just to keep up appearances with the women at her country club. They never asked if I was okay. They only ever notified me of the balance. While I was skipping vacations and working 60-hour weeks to build my career as a compliance officer, Destiny was busy manufacturing a life for the internet. I had paid for her so-called fashion internship in Milan 2 summers ago, which I later discovered was just a 20-day shopping trip. She spent $5,000 of my money on outfits just to take photos in front of cathedrals for 10,000 followers who didn't know her middle name. My family viewed my bank account as a communal asset and my personal boundaries as a declaration of war. This is what I now recognize as the trap of normalized cruelty. In a toxic family dynamic, the responsible child is eventually stripped of their humanity and reduced to a utility. They didn't see my discipline or my late nights at the office. They only saw an unlimited line of credit with a pulse. They had spent decades normalizing the idea that my only value was what I could provide. To them, my success wasn't something to be proud of, it was something to be harvested. It is a specialized form of manipulation, where your competence is used as a justification for their abuse. They called me the strong one, but that was just code for the one who could be bled dry without complaining. I looked at my hands and thought about the countless hours of overtime and the missed social life I had sacrificed to ensure they didn't lose everything. I had carried the weight of 4 people's lives on my shoulders, and they hadn't even bothered to ask if my back was hurting. They had romanticized their parasitism as family loyalty, but the balance sheet told a different story. It told a story of one person building a future while 4 others tried to burn it, just to stay warm. I looked at the dark screen of my phone and realized that my role in this family hadn't been built on love. I decided to stop engaging with the constant broadcast of their demands. I was done being the audience for their manufactured tragedies. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for years, and tonight I was closing the account for good. The math was finally simple. I owed myself more than I would ever owe them. I woke up to a heart attack, not a medical one, but the kind of adrenaline surge that only hits when your phone screams at you in the dead of night. It was 3:17 a.m. The notifications were stacked on my lock screen like a wall of bricks. 50 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 84 text messages. The breakdown was terrifying. Mom had called 20 times, Dad 15, Tyler 10. Even Destiny had tried me 5 times. The texts were a garbled stream of unfiltered panic. Pick up, emergency, police, answer the damn phone, Gabrielle. My hands were steady, but my pulse was a drumbeat against my eardrums as I unlocked the screen. The silence of my Boston apartment suddenly felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. I pressed call back for my father, Bradley. He answered on the first ring. He didn't sound like the man who had lectured me about family obligations a week ago. His voice was an octave too high, cracked and breathless. In the background, I heard shouting in Greek, the static of a police radio, and the unmistakable sound of my mother sobbing a deep, guttural wail that made my skin crawl. Dad, what is going on? Is someone hurt? I asked, my voice clinical. It's a disaster, he choked out. Everything is gone. Julian, that bastard, left. My mind automatically began to categorize the information. What do you mean he left? He's gone, Gabrielle. He took the cash gifts. He took the jewelry. He took the rental car. He wasn't some tech billionaire. He was a professional scammer from Athens with a record longer than your arm. He left Destiny at the altar. I sat up and rubbed my temples, trying to process the sheer scale of the stupidity. Okay, I said, that's terrible. But why are the police there? Did you file a report for the theft? No, Dad stammered, the panic turning into something sharper, something more aggressive. They aren't here for him. They're here for us. Tyler and your mother. They didn't take the news well. There was damage, Gabrielle. Significant damage. He whispered the next part as if the walls of the police station could hear him. The villa in Oya. They started throwing things. Expensive things. A statue from the 1800s. Some original paintings. The owners called the authorities. They've arrested Tyler. They have Destiny in a holding room. They took our passports. They won't let us leave the island. The trap was being set. I could hear it in the way he hurried his words. You need a lawyer, Dad. Call the embassy. We don't have time for the embassy, he snapped. The Greek authorities are holding Tyler and Destiny on felony fraud charges. The villa owner's attorney just told us they'll only drop the criminal complaint if the €55,000 damage is settled in full, right now. Otherwise, they'll be transferred to a mainland prison for trial. Gabby, please, it's a civil settlement, not a bribe, but we need the wire transfer immediately. Otherwise, your sister goes to prison. Gabrielle, a Greek prison. You have to do this. We are your family. The guilt he was trying to install was a piece of software I had already uninstalled. I listened to him scream my name through the phone, and all I saw was a bad investment asking for one more injection of capital. I didn't answer right away. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hit the speaker button. I needed my hands for something more reliable than my father's word. I opened my laptop, the screen reflecting a cold, clinical light against my face. My fingers flew across the keys as I logged into my primary banking portal. Gabrielle, are you there? Are you doing it? My father's voice was a tinny, desperate screech on the desk. I'm checking something, I muttered. I wasn't checking my balance, I was checking my exposure. I logged into my credit monitoring service. I hadn't looked at it in a month because my finances were usually on autopilot. The dashboard loaded, and a bright red banner flashed at the top of the screen like a siren's light. Alert. New account opened 14 days ago. Banca Nazionale del Lavoro. Type international personal line of credit. Balance €42,000. The request had originated from an IP address in Boston, from the desktop computer in my parents' study, just hours before they boarded their flight to Athens. They had sat in their living room, plotting this while I was at work. Then I saw another red flag, a rental agreement check for the Oya estate. I opened the PDF attachment. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. The name on the lease for that 17th century villa wasn't Emily or Bradley. It was Gabrielle J. Harper. My signature was scrawled at the bottom, a clumsy forgery. The loops of the G were a little too wide. The slant was wrong, but it was close enough to pass a casual inspection by a Greek property manager who just wanted a paycheck. Dad, I said, my voice as flat as a dead heart monitor. Who is the renter of record for that villa? What does it matter? We need the money. Who signed the lease? Dad. There was heavy, ragged breathing on the line. Then my mother's voice cut in, shrill and frantic. She must have grabbed the phone. We didn't have a choice, Gabrielle. Your credit score is perfect. You never use it. We were going to pay it off with the wedding gifts. Julian said his family would cover the venue costs eventually. You stole my identity, I said. The words tasted like ash. You didn't just spend my money. You hijacked my future. You rented a historical landmark under my name, and then you trashed it. We did it for the family, Mom screamed. Don't you dare get self-righteous with me. If you don't pay this, you are the one liable. The contract is in your name. If we don't pay the damages, the police will come after you for the debt. They'll ruin your career. You'll lose your license. I sat frozen. The trap snapped shut. They weren't asking for a bailout. They were asking me to cover up a felony to save my own skin. If I paid that €55,000, I was acknowledging the debt was mine. I was accepting the fraud. I would be paying to fix a villa I never set foot in, to save people who saw me as nothing more than a credit score with a pulse. They thought they had checkmated me. They were banking on my shame, but they forgot one thing. I was a compliance officer. I knew how to mitigate risk. And the biggest risk to my life wasn't the Greek police. It was them. The silence on the line was thick, punctuated only by the ragged breathing of people who had finally run out of lies. I sat in the blue light of my laptop, looking at the €42,000 debt that now carried my name. My parents didn't sound like family anymore. They sounded like the subjects of a forensic audit. How much of the surgery fund is left? I asked, my voice as steady as a ledger. 3 years ago, I had established a high-yield savings account for them. I had made my mother a joint owner for emergency access only. A professional lapse in judgment I now realized was my greatest mistake. I thought the emergency would be a hospital stay, not a destination wedding. I had deposited $120,000 into it, strictly for their medical emergencies or long-term care. It was the only reason I could sleep at night while they lived their reckless, credit-fueled lives. "It's gone, Gabrielle," my mother whispered. "All of it. The deposit for the estate, the catering for 50 elite guests, the private boat tour Julian insisted on. We needed that money to secure the venue. $120,000. That wasn't just a number to me. It was 5 years of 60-hour work weeks. It was every missed holiday, every vacation I didn't take, and every lunch I brought from home while my colleagues ate out. I had built a fortress of security to protect them from themselves, and they had dismantled it to buy a 3-day fantasy for my sister. They hadn't just stolen my credit, they had looted the very safety net I'd woven to catch them when they eventually hit the bottom. "You spent your own survival fund on flowers and a fake groom," I said. "This isn't an emergency, Mom. This is an insolvency." "Don't you dare talk to me about money right now," she shrieked. The transformation was instant. The begging was gone, replaced by the sharp, familiar edge of her manipulation. "If you don't authorize that €55,000 wire for the damages, we will tell the authorities that you are the mastermind. The lease is in your name. The credit line is in your name. If this goes to court, we will testify that you authorized everything to avoid taxes. Think about your career, Gabrielle. Think about your license. One fabricated ethics report to FINRA or the SEC, and your precious compliance career is dead. We'll tell them you laundered the wedding funds through us to dodge federal taxes. They'll strip your credentials before you can even explain." I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon the old, programmed feelings of panic or shame, but there was only clarity. They were no longer my parents. They were a predatory liability attempting a hostile takeover of my life. They were banking on my fear of scandal, assuming I would pay anything to protect my professional reputation. They thought my integrity was a weakness they could exploit one last time. They weren't shocked by what they had done. They were only shocked that I had stopped playing along. My mother continued to rant about the duty of a daughter, but her words had no currency left. I looked at the forgery of my signature on the digital screen, the clumsy G. Harper that was supposed to be my death warrant. For 30 years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family. I had been the one to fix the broken card machines and pay the bail bonds. But the subscription had become too expensive, and tonight I was finally hitting the unsubscribe button. I sat in the dark, the blue light of my laptop screen, illuminating the forgery of my own name on the Oya estate lease. My father's voice was still pleading in my ear, a frantic, incoherent loop of blood and family. I didn't feel the old programming kicking in. I didn't feel the urge to fix the mess they had created. I felt like an auditor who had just found the final, damning piece of evidence in a decade-long fraud case. "Put the officer on the phone," I said. My voice was stripped of all emotion, clinical and cold. "What?" "Gabrielle, no, you don't understand," Bradley stammered, his desperation reaching a fever pitch. "If you talk to them, it's official. Just wire the €55,000. We can solve this as a family." "Put him on now, Bradley, or I hang up and block this number forever," I replied, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You'll be on your own in a Greek holding cell by morning." There was a scuffle, the sound of the phone being snatched away, and then a deep, weary voice spoke. "Nye. This is Inspector Giorgio." "Inspector Georgiou," I said. I was recording the call on my laptop to ensure a perfect paper trail. "My name is Gabrielle Harper. I am a senior control compliance officer currently located in Boston, Massachusetts, United States. I am calling to report a crime." "Gabrielle!" I heard my mother shriek in the distance, a sound of pure terror. "Shut up! Don't you dare!" I ignored her. I was focused on the inspector's professional silence. The people currently in your custody have committed international identity theft and financial fraud. I did not sign the lease for the villa in Oya. I did not authorize the €42,000 line of credit. I have been in the United States for the last 6 months. My passport stamps and my employer can verify my location immediately. The inspector's tone shifted instantly, from annoyance to professional alertness. Understood, Miss Harper. We have the documents here. You are stating these are forgeries? Yes, I am officially flagging these transactions as criminal activity. I am also contacting the United States Consulate and my bank's fraud department as we speak. Proceed with the charges for the vandalism. They are responsible for the restoration and the fines, not me. The background of the call exploded. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs. I heard Destiny wailing, a sound of pure, unearned victimhood that no longer moved me. I heard my mother screaming my name, her voice cracking with a terror she had earned through years of exploitation. Gabrielle, please. Bradley was sobbing now, his voice coming from somewhere further away. They're taking us. You're destroying your own family. I don't have a family, I said into the receiver, delivering the final blow. I have a fraud case, and I'm finally closing the file. Goodbye, Bradley. I hung up. The silence that followed in my apartment was absolute. It was the most expensive silence I had ever bought, costing me a family I never really had, but for the first time in 30 years, I could finally breathe. The legal aftermath was swift and final. Greek authorities do not take the destruction of historical landmarks lightly. Tyler ended up serving 18 months in a facility outside of Athens. Destiny was deported, her social media accounts deactivated after the influencer wedding of the decade became a global case study in fraud and vanity. My parents, Emily and Bradley, were forced to sell their suburban home to cover the massive legal fees and the restitution costs for the villa. They now live in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, finally facing the reality of a budget they had spent a lifetime ignoring. I did not take pleasure in their ruin. In fact, I did not look back at all. I was too busy sowing a different kind of harvest. I used the money I had protected from their hands to establish a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of family financial exploitation. It is what I call the sower's justice. While my parents focused on the justice of punishment, obsessing over what they had lost, I focused on the justice of creation. My revenge was not their poverty. My revenge was my own peace and the ability to ensure no one else would have to feel like a hostage to their own bloodline. It is winter now in Boston. I am standing by my window, watching the first heavy snow of the year cover the skyline in a silent white blanket. I drink my coffee black, and for the first time in my life, there is no noise in my head. No frantic requests for money, no guilt-laden voicemails, no frantic calls at 3 a.m. I have realized that boundaries are not acts of war, they are acts of love for the self. Blood should be a bond, not a chain. To those of you who have always been the responsible one, the invisible one, or the wallet for your family, I am writing this for you. You do not owe your future to people who only see you as a resource to be mined. You are not a safety net for people who refuse to stop jumping. Walking away is not a betrayal of them. It is a commitment to your own survival. I have come to realize that the most expensive thing I ever bought was my silence. It cost me a family I never really had, but it bought me a future that is finally and completely mine. Don't let anyone use the word family to steal your light. If you support the choice to choose yourself, please share this story with someone who needs to hear it today.